What if healing ourselves was the key to healing the planet? Welcome to Net Positive, where we help you to transform eco-anxiety into action through regeneration and resilience. I'm Richard Garrett, and today we're discussing the intersection of personal resilience and sustainability leadership with Holly Holton. Welcome to the podcast, Holly.
Thank you, Richard. Happy to be here.
I'm excited for our conversation. Holly is a workplace resilience strategist and leadership coach who helps change makers, thought leaders, and sustainability champions find their voice, practice their power, and cultivate resilience because systems don't change unless people do. With over 20 years of experience in sustainability and built environment sectors, Holly has seen firsthand how burnout, self-doubt, and disconnection can prevent even the most passionate advocates from making an impact. Holly believes that resilient people create resilient solutions and that healing ourselves is the first step to healing our planet. In our conversation today, Holly and I will discuss how to quiet your inner critic and find your voice, building personal resilience and staying in the fight without burning out, and how self-awareness is the key to unlocking your full potential. And our conversation with Holly today is for anyone who's feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure of their next steps, change makers struggling with burnout, self-doubt, or eco-anxiety, or leaders and teams looking to cultivate resilience, emotional intelligence, and purpose-driven action. Holly, I'm excited for our conversation today, not only for the topics we'll discuss, but even just making ready for today's conversation. It's been exciting to really pick at the different ways that purpose-driven action folks like you and me really show up for each other. But I'm really curious to unpack what first drew you to the connection between personal resilience and sustainability.
Well, it's a long journey. I'll tell it as succinctly as possible, but as long as I can remember, for as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated with human development, motivation, behavior, everything that makes us tick, the why of what we do. And I was the kid who went to the mall and just spent my whole time in Barnes and Noble in the self-help section, reading every book on what, figuring this thing out. Right. And so fast forward, I got an education in psychology. I found my career path in sustainability in the built environment. Like you said, spent, a couple of decades there. Along the way, a real pivotal moment for me was when I was given a book called Play to Win, which is actually, I think I have it. I have so many books, but I was just looking at it. Play to Win. This is a book I was given early in my corporate career, choosing growth over fear in life and work. And this was the first time I had this lightning bolt of wow, the people are part of the equation. We have to take care of each other. So like I said, spent 2 decades in sustainability in the built environment. In recent years, I realized that the message wasn't really getting through, that the people side of the equation, there's that old 3-legged stool in sustainability, right? Planet, profit, people. And that the people side wasn't getting enough attention, really wasn't getting focused on. So I kept this phrase kept coming into my head that we need to heal the people to heal the planet, that, broken systems cannot be fixed by broken people. That type of rhetoric kept going through my head. And then I created a CEU, continuing education presentation to give to architects and designers to keep with their certifications. And it was called More Than a Score. And over the last 2 years or so, I gave that presentation probably hundreds of times to over 2,000 people in the built environment. So if you're listening to this, you may have heard More Than a Score before, but it really focused on that people side of sustainability, that there's so much more to product sustainability than just, the features and of the product itself and the way it's made. And I started to get such robust conversations around it that we need the very best of us to tackle these very big problems. So as you know, our world faces these huge twin crises of a planet in, peril, and also this epidemic of stress, burnout, disengagement that we're all facing. So the people and the planet are both hurting. And from all of those sparks, my company was born to focus on greater resilience.
Tell me about some of the emotions that you felt early on in your pathway here that really were kind of the nexus of change for you. Tell me about what it felt like to you to observe these conditions that really got you scratching your head or prompted this deep thought. Tell me a little more about that observation in your pivot, in your moment here.
I started to see that there were like a lot of the messaging wasn't getting through, and that when people really were able to find their voice and to connect with the people they wanted to influence, with different factions, that its communication was more clear. So I just realized that I think when you ask about emotions, I think it was just the realization that when we do the work on ourselves to heal, to become the very best versions of us, that we are so much more able to do the important work we need to do. I don't know if that answered it about emotions. I think I was just excited. I was excited about that this was a topic that seemed to be needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the intersection of workplace culture and return to work and post-pandemic and all of that was kind of converging at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I think that you're answering my question. I'm going to kind of pick at it a little more. So along your pathway, you're seeing this need to have connection and that strength in communication, and you're observing that it's like lacking there, that the message isn't getting through. And so that's got to be giving you frustration. Like, why aren't they listening? Or why isn't this message getting through? Where is there the disconnect? And so I think where I'm trying to link this to is you've now started to bring in the human element, the people element, the personal element, the emotional element into this kind of work, and allowing people to bring maybe I don't want to give you words, but bringing their whole selves, allowing them to be vulnerable, allowing them to have fear and anxiety. Okay, let me maybe rephrase my question. I have fear and anxiety.
Gotcha.
And I'm part of a team that is
Right.
mission oriented and wants to be transformative. I have this inner critic that gives me some self-doubt in this. And so I want to know kind of along your pathway where you observed the need, figured out what some potential solutions were. There has to be a moment of some self-criticism and doubt there. So I'm curious about what your emotions were like through this mission, and then what you did to kind of overcome them to build into your professional pathway now.
Okay. So there's a lot there.
So there's a lot to unpack.
So first of all, change doesn't happen without vulnerability, without trust, without psychological safety, like real lasting positive change. And so we're talking about creating cultures that are human centered, but also working on ourselves, right? Okay. So fear and anxiety, there's a lot of that. So you mentioned the inner critic. I think that's a really good place to start. So we all have an inner critic, right? We all know what that is. Sometimes it's called imposter syndrome. I don't like to call it that because it's like, sounds like a disease, a syndrome. We don't have that, but we all have an inner critic, every one of us. It is, that nasty voice in our head that's telling us, we're not enough. We don't have enough. We're not this enough. We're not that enough. We're just not enough. Right. And so it is this voice that plays in our head, and it keeps us from being creative. It keeps us from taking risks. It doesn't enable us to make positive change at all because it's based on the premise that something is wrong with us. Right. So I think there's a lot of things we can do to work with that inner critic, to quiet it a bit. I think that the first thing to realize is that it is, you may know this, that it is perfectly normal that all of us have that inner critic, that it is a part of our brain's innate negativity bias, right? That has kept us safe for eons. And, at one point it kept us, safe from a saber-toothed tiger, but now it keeps us in this like land of self-doubt and negative self-talk. It serves its purpose, but definitely know that it's part of who we are. It's normal. We have a normal negativity bias because, of course, looking for the danger, looking for the tiger kept us alive, while like gazing at a beautiful sunset did not keep us alive. It kept us vulnerable. So we are wired to be negative. That's huge. So just know that. And when I think, for me, when I realize that, I can be kinder to myself. I can say, okay, that's that inner critic. Everybody has one. It's chattering away. I hear you. So there's a couple things we can do with that. We can question it. We can challenge it. A lot of times it is telling us a story that is based on old patterns and beliefs, and it's not even true. The little 3-word question, is it true, is huge for me. And you can say, is that true? Is that true? Where did I pick that up from? Why am I, what is this self-talk going on? And a lot of times the answer is, yes, that's true, obviously. But you just keep asking yourself and you can dig deeper. I always say you have to challenge it to change it. So that is it true question is huge. And I have some other tips and tricks about the inner critic if you want me to go on.
I'm taking notes.
Okay. So a couple other things you can do along the lines of self-talk are what I call tough talk and tender talk. And
tell me more.
we all know what this is, right? So tough talk is sometimes you just need a little pep talk. Sometimes you just need to rally the troops. And when you say like, is it true? You say like, come on, like you can do better than this. You've done this before, or whatever it is. You have to give yourself a little bit of a talking to. And then there's sometimes when tough talk is too much. Maybe you're, a little bit in your feelings and the world has been a lot and you need a little tender talk. And that's when you say, hey, hey kiddo, I gotcha. We're okay. Well, you may be feeling this way right now, but it's not forever. So you kind of tender talk yourself. And I think knowing when to tough talk and when to tender talk yourself is a real skill to quiet that inner critic, to move forward from there. So challenge it, ask, is it true? Ask it again and again and again until you get the answer. Tough talk, tender talk. Another thing you can do is look at your past achievements.
Take stock.
Yeah, right? I mean, seriously, so, we have this gift as humans. We can think about what we think about. Like we can go in interior and think about I call it, your library of priors. What did you do? Have you heard that before? Like,
no.
what have you done in the past? Where have you been successful before? Where have you turned it around before? Where have you been resilient? Whatever it is, what's your library of priors? What's your prior achievements? And choose to believe that's who you are rather than your current circumstances. And the last thing I would say you could do is think about someone who truly believes in you. You might be not able to find that. The inner critic might be shouting right now, but there is somebody in your life who truly believes in you and sees your greatness and doesn't have the advantage of hearing your inner critic. They have their own, right? But they don't hear yours. And so, I call it borrowing their belief. Borrow someone else's belief in you if you don't have the belief in yourself. And I think all of these things can set you on the path to really keeping that inner critic in check. And again, know that it's never going to go away. It's in all of us. It's our brain. It's our negativity bias keeping us safe. It's doing its job. So it's normal, but you can tough talk and tender talk it. You can borrow someone else's belief. You can look at your library of priors and you can really challenge it and ask, is this really true? So that was a lot, I know, but I love to talk about the inner critic because it is something that we all share.
Let's continue. We're having a therapy session, if you don't mind. This is now a conversation between me and you.
Right.
So I definitely have the inner critic, and it's something that I've been really challenged with over time and building up this confidence and shifting my mindset is something I've really worked on over my lifespan, but a tactic I have not implemented well, but something that I think is exactly what you're mentioning here, the library of priors. Is that what you
That your
called it?
prior achievements. What have you done? Your library of priors.
I heard that called a bragalogue or a brag book.
I like that. Yeah.
And that's something that I need to take better advantage of as a strategy, even just reminding and refreshing myself. The theme of this podcast is around the journey and pathway, like reminding myself when it's muddy and dirty and I have skinned up knees that we've come a long way since then. So I think that that's important to mention there. And then the last part you mentioned there about kind of quieting self-doubt. Actually, the first one that you mentioned there around the positive talk, self-talk, has been something useful that I'm really good at coming up with disaster scenarios. Like excellent at coming,
Right.
maybe that's my humanity, my
It's your brain.
hardwiring to keep me
Right.
safe. But I can imagine the saber-toothed tigers
Yeah.
coming to get me at times. So you've
Right.
given me some
You
strategies
are
here.
not alone in that at all. I mean, and I just think knowing that that's normal. And listen, there's so much we don't know about our brains. There's still so much we don't know. But to know that that's just us trying to keep safe, that can be huge to overcome it. To
Tell
not
me,
judge yourself for that, you know?
tell me a little more about creating places of safety and security. I think one of the last ones there that you mentioned was to borrow the voice of someone who believes in you. So, if you will, tell me a little more about ways to overcome the fear and anxiety of being vulnerable with that person that you may need some support from. Hey, Holly, I'm having this challenge in my life. I kind of feel a little embarrassed to tell you about X, Y, and Z. How do you break down some of those feelings of fear around even borrowing? Just asking for help sometimes is really hard. Tell me more
Right.
about borrowing the voice there and how to overcome some of the barriers.
I am a huge champion in vulnerability, and that, you know, we can never have true connection. We can never have true positive, lasting change without being vulnerable, and that you just need to practice it. It's a practice to overcome that, to say, ask somebody for their feedback, be vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, you show your humanity. Vulnerability actually increases oxytocin, you know, which is the human bonding hormone. So
Mm.
when you see this isn't, I don't know if this is off topic, but I read that when people do a TED talk, right? The most highly rated TED Talks are usually the ones that are by like a scientist or like a really introverted person who is clearly not comfortable on the stage, even though they go
Mm-hmm.
through coaching and all of that, right? But the ones that are super polished, they're not rated as high. But the ones where you can see the people maybe flub up a bit, maybe show their nervousness, you immediately, that oxytocin comes up and you bond with that person. That's the thing, is like when you're vulnerable, people want that, really. They want to see that. They want that connection. People don't, you know, want to be impressed by you. They want to be connected to you at their heart. So I think this knowing that vulnerability is the first step, you got to take that risk. You got to put
Mm.
yourself out there. If you need help, you need to ask for it. And I think that you talked about like spaces of safety. Anybody who has the ability to have influence over a space or a group of people, a leader, a team, to make vulnerability okay is a huge thing. And it starts with them. Practice it yourself.
So I want to take another milestone here along the way in our conversation and talk a little more about building personal resilience. I think that's a nice segue from kind of emotional vulnerability, building up personal resilience. And I'm even going to take the next step to like help prevent burning out. I think that there's a lot of emotion involved in mission-based and climate work, and burnout is a very real job hazard.
For sure.
I like to say when describing this podcast and my journey with it that I didn't really know what eco emotion or eco anxiety was until I experienced it firsthand. And so I'm really curious to talk with you about emotional burnout and resilience and some tools and tips that you might have to practice empathy for ourselves and how to stay in the game.
Sure. Resilience is one of my favorite topics. I have it in the name of my company, and I cannot overestimate the power of having this like inner reserve. I call it like an inner battery. When your
Mm-hmm.
batteries needs to be charged or your phone needs to be put on the charger, right? You need to have more resilience. So first of all, the word resilience, I think, is like becoming a little bit overused. It's kind of like sustainability, the word, in a way that, people like, what does it really mean? So I like to always try to define it. Resilience means the ability to prepare for, to recover from, and adapt to stress, adversity, challenge, right? So you bounce back better. Can bounce back from, stress, adversity, and challenges. So I think that's a good, just to think about, like, what does it mean? It means like this well of, you know, capability to deal with all of the things we need to deal with. So the question is, how do you cultivate that for yourself? How do you charge your inner battery? How do you gain greater resilience? And it is, like everything else, a practice. And it starts with emotional regulation. One of the gifts of being human is that we get to choose how we feel. And that seems like a really simplistic statement, right? But we, sometimes, we go through life very reactive. We wake up in the morning and we're like, I hope something good happens to me so I'll feel good. Or I hope something bad doesn't happen to me so I won't feel bad, right? And we live in this kind of like roller coaster of good, bad, feeling, whatever, and reacting to it. But we actually have the power to call up an emotion based on our thought alone. And we do this all the time. And it's like, you know, it's what the Sunday scaries is, right? You can like think about a meeting you have to have, or a difficult conversation, or you can remember a meeting or a difficult conversation, and you can feel that anxiety welling up, and you're perfectly safe. We're sitting here talking, right? But on the flip side, you can also call up a positive emotion. So we know that when we are experiencing, empowering emotions, our hearts and our brains are operating coherently. We are in our like rest and digest state, as opposed to like, like flight, freeze, flight, and fight. And it's measurable. It's called our heart rate variability. And we can measure that. When people are in a calm state, they have this very coherent state. And in that state of coherence, they're more resilient. They're more creative. They're more calm. They're able to have a productive conversation, or to be strategic and to plan and be innovative about all of that. And when we're not, when we're knocked out of balance, when we have a really, low inner battery, we're the opposite. We're not able to be creative. We're not able to collaborate or to really be the best versions of ourselves. So we have, scientists have shown that we can actually get ourselves into that state. There's a lot of breathing techniques you can do to get into heart rate coherence, or heart brain coherence. And I think the big thing to do is that most of us just don't even realize we have the ability. That's our gift of being human, of this big frontal lobe neocortex. We can actually create emotions. So if you can create negative emotions, like you said, like worried about creating all these negative situations in your head, you can also create positive ones. And the more we can do that, you can be calm even in a chaotic environment. And that's not easy. It is a practice, but it is definitely, something that you can do. It's big work with a big payoff.
Wow, that's going to be a journey. I'm on this journey.
We all
I
are. We all are.
I would say that I constantly work towards emotional regulation and making sure I'm checking in with myself, but it takes practice and I'm not very good at it.
I think it starts, I have been trained in a coherence practice from a place called the Heart Math Institute, like heart with math,
Mm.
MATH. And they are a research and educational organization that has studied heart rate variability for like 40 years. And they have breathing techniques and they have practices and visualization exercises where they actually help people get into heart rate, coherence. And they actually measure it with biofeedback. It's a whole thing. It's very fascinating. But there are people who study this and actually help people get there.
I learned about box breathing. That was helpful.
Box breathing. Well, anytime we have and box breathing isn't this, but if we have a longer exhale than inhale, it definitely turns on our parasympathetic nervous system and turns off our sympathetic nervous system. So we get out of fight and flight. But box breathing, just that, counting 4, 4, 4, 4, that's huge too.
Okay, another waypoint on our conversation. You said, and I said even in the lead up here, that broken systems cannot be fixed by broken people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's thematic to our conversation so far. But I'd like to know what that means to you in practice.
First of all, I feel like when you say it, it sounds kind of harsh, right? Broken people. But we're all a bit broken, right? We're all carry within us past traumas and old subconscious stories and even like epigenetically from like our ancestors and things, and we are all like organisms living within systems that really don't support the best versions of us always, right? There's a lot of chaos. It's like out there right now. It's strange times, and maybe it's always strange times, but I think that healing ourselves, just even knowing that we have the power to heal ourselves by quieting our inner critic and by practicing more personal resilience, that those are the things that we all have to do individually to fix systems that aren't working. Like we just need the very best versions of ourselves. We've got big work to do. And so that's, what I mean by broken systems are not fixed by broken people, because the work we can do starts within us. And it sounds like a big task. It's like, don't we have enough to do? But really, the work on healing ourselves is how it's all going to change if we all take that responsibility.
Tell me about that self-awareness portion of it, though, particularly in just recognizing the state of the system.
So a lot of my work is around helping people become more aware of what they do well, their innate talents, their motivations. I call it the why and the how of you. And I truly help them become a student of themselves. And that's where it starts. It starts, with a foundation of self-awareness. So that's a lot of what I do, like in workshops and one-on-one, is helping people really harness and just, discover and harness their personal power, because we weren't taught that, growing up. We weren't taught that in school about, why do I do the things I do? And why is it, this about you that drives me crazy? Like that we all see the world through a very different lens. And here we all show up together trying to affect change and to make things happen and to really keep going forward in our mission. And we don't even really understand ourselves and each other. So I think that level of awareness is the foundation for everything. Knowing your innate talents, knowing your strengths, knowing your habits and beliefs and where they came from. It's the work we need to lean into that so we can examine and re-examine why we do the things we do, how we show up in the world. Going back to kind of what you said about like, borrowing their belief or whatever, you can like have your own kind of like belief in yourself when like, I do this really well, and I don't do that really well. So I think just learning about yourself, that's what I mean by self-awareness. It is such a practice that is so important and, needs to be taught to everyone. But yeah, anything you can do to kind of have that. I don't know if that answered your question.
I think it does. And I'm starting to see the link between borrow their belief and the self-positive talking and how it fits in with sort of this foundational self-awareness. It kind of changes the internal narrative, but also I've had the good fortune of having a close friend like give me constructive feedback. It wasn't criticism, but it was how to take something and make it even better. And it was nice to have that voice, external voice, to help kind of shape the narrative going on in my self-awareness.
Mhm.
And it's only by borrowing that vision of them of us, their view of them of us, was I able to like take good use of that advice and feedback. So I'm just kind of formulating this here, that my friend and ally believes in me, vocalizes that, gives some constructive feedback like a mentor,
Mhm.
and can really help shape sort of the momentum that comes along with that self-positive talk and building up that system, that foundation there.
And you were willing to be vulnerable, right? Because you obviously, it was probably solicited advice. You asked
It
them
was
for constructive
unsolicited,
feedback.
which made it even better.
Okay, yeah, okay. So
Someone who
yeah,
cares enough to give their
right.
opinion on how to improve.
But you were willing to, kind of like put your inner critic aside for a second and accept their, their input as in a loving way, right? They were able to give it to you in a way that was kind and caring, but you had to be willing to be vulnerable and willing to be like, okay, I can see that. But yeah,
And
it's so much. Go ahead.
well, it helped me to identify just like strengths and blind spots. I
Mm-hmm.
think that we were talking here about building up strengths, but I think that there's the other side of that. It's just what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, those blind spots. So it's
Right.
helpful to have those allies out there who can say, hey, but I noticed something here. Here's a way to improve the good work that you're doing.
And I think it's important to get that external feedback. Absolutely. Because they can see like your actions, but what they can't see is your motivations. Because
Mm.
you and I could have this exhibit the same behavior, right? But we could have vastly different reasons for doing whatever we're doing, helping someone or whatever it is. So when you understand like not only the what you do best and where your blind spots are, but also like the how and the why of what you do. The why is such a deep thing to unpack. Like, what is your true motivation and what is it based in? Is it based in fear? Is it based in whatever? It's like it's to know that too. So it's deep work, but when people really break through and know that they have this really strong foundation of who they are, they can do the work of changing. They can do the work of moving forward. They can become the best versions of themselves. So yeah, most calmest, most creative, most connected versions of ourselves. Because I had somebody give me some feedback the other day and they said, when you say best versions of yourself, it sounds like really toxic positivity like. And I'm like, I don't mean that at all. I mean, like, we all have big work to do here in the world. And if we can become the most creative, the most calm, the most connected, that's the lever. That's where we're going to move forward. That's why I say heal the people to heal the planet.
You just said a key phrase that now my brain has gone down a new path. And I want to explore toxic positivity here for a moment, because I think that there's certainly other catchphrases and that you've heard, fake it till you make it. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of us are doing that. Imposter syndrome comes along with that.
Right.
But toxic positivity is kind of this unique thing where you want to motivate people and get them on board. You want to be promoting them and celebrating their good work. You want to be a great leader and helping to motivate, but talk to me a little about toxic positivity and how maybe others or leadership may view this kind of work in getting a team rallied or creating workplace culture. I think that may be
Mm-hmm.
one of the critiques is, oh, our culture isn't of this toxic positivity, Pollyanna, sweetness and light.
Yeah.
It's certainly, I mean, the theme of this whole podcast is around eco-anxiety and fear-based. So tell me about your experiences with toxic positivity in the workplace?
I have seen what you're saying, that like, this is like fluff and it's not needed and it's not necessary. And I've also seen it like, what do you mean? We're doing great. We're like a family. We all support each other, don't
Mm-hmm.
we? And like, meanwhile, there's no hands raised in the meeting when they're asked if there's any questions, right? Because there's no psychological safety. So toxic positivity is worse than not having any positivity. It is, a failure to look at anything dark or anything negative and to just kind of like glaze over things. And that's not what we want, right? It's not, this is deep work. This is big work. And what we're realizing more and more is that the work of investing truly in people is not easy. It is, people are messy. We come with all of this emotional baggage and, you show up at a meeting
Warts
around
and
a
all.
table, right? Or in a Zoom screen and you have like 10 different, people showing up there for every one person because we have so much going on in our internal world. So many times people don't want to look at the people side of things. Like that's just kind of like inconvenient, right? But I heard a definition of positivity one time, actually in the Gallup Strengths Finder, which I'm certified in that modality. There's a strength of positivity, so you can lead with positivity.
Mm-hmm.
And I was coaching a leader who had positivity and harmony. Actually, positivity and harmony is number 1 and 2. And he said to me, "I don't always see the glass half full."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Sometimes I see the glass half empty, but I have a pitcher standing by and I can fill it up." And I thought that was such a strong definition of what it means to be a truly positive leader, not a toxic positive leader. It's like, it's dang hard to be human. It's like, especially right now in our world. And to know that like, okay, sometimes the glass is half empty. It truly is, but we can be the ones to fill it up. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question about toxic positivity.
I think
I could talk for
perfectly.
an hour about that, but it definitely is something to be aware of because it's seen, like I said, like people don't really want to deal with the people part of it. It's messy. It's not easy.
Hey, let's transition to our next segment and get a little dirty in the garden. Welcome to the community garden segment of Net
Okay.
Positive. Have you ever done the rose, thorn, bud conversation technique before?
Yes. Rosebud thorn. Yes.
Rose, bud, thorn.
Yeah.
Okay, for those listening, a quick refresher. A rose is something that's currently great in your world. It's blossoming today, something really awesome. A bud is hope for the future there as you look through your telescope at the horizon. And a thorn is a sticky problem, like a cactus that we might be able to help you with. So, Holly, tell me here, what's really fragrant in your world these days?
Well, okay. My rose would be around this conversation is that I took a big leap this year and I left corporate sustainability and my work has been really well received. So that's definitely my rose. What's the next one, bud?
Yeah, actually, I want to ask you about the
Thorn?
thorn. Yeah,
Well,
what kind of prickly problem may you be having?
I I think that the thorn is that there's still this like overwhelming, unprecedented epidemic of stress and burnout and loneliness. And that our world needs a lot of help and a lot of care, and we need a lot of kindness for ourselves. So I think that's just my thorn is, like I said earlier, how hard it is to be human.
Mm, the experience.
Yes.
Give me some hope for the future. What's your
Well,
bud?
I think we talked about this a little bit. A bud for me, that's my hope, right? A bud. A bud would be that more and more people are waking up to the realization that when they invest in their people, or when an individual truly invests on doing the hard work of becoming a student of themselves, of learning about them, that more and more people are starting to wake up to that. We're having more conversations like the one we've been having. And it just gives me a lot of hope for the future. I still think that there is a lot of good in the world and that we are on the precipice of huge change. I mean, look at the workplace. Look at like return to work battles and remote work and all of that that's gone on. I mean, the workplace has to change. The people are a part of this equation. They're part of that three-legged stool. And that stool's been kind of wobbly, but it's starting to shore up.
I just want to make sure that we spend enough time on the rose part, that this is where your work is directly impacting people. And we've talked about how hard it is to be human and be in this experience. So that is a particularly fragrant one. Let's not move too far past that.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. And I think like my love has been sustainability, right? My whole career has been around sustainability, but helping people who are doing big work to find their voice. I think that's definitely my rose, to help people who are helping people.
Mm-hmm. Help me distill our conversation into a few actionable tips or tricks that we could give away, like sunflower seeds. You've talked about just checking in with self-awareness, building up resiliency. You've actually given us some strategies here of finding our strengths, but what kind of tips or tricks could we leave folks with?
Yeah, I feel like I've given us a lot of tips and tricks, but I think that I would leave people with the knowledge that you have more power than you realize. That you have the power within you to change, to know yourself, to build your own personal resilience, to, quiet your self-talk, all of that like we don't give ourselves enough credit for the power we have as individuals to change ourselves and to change systems around us. So that would be my seed I would like to plant in everyone's heart, is that, you have more power than you think.
Last question here in the garden. Who has lit your path and helped you to grow along the way? Who have been your mentors?
Oh, gosh. Well, like I said earlier, I never met a self-development book I didn't love. One of my mentors is a woman who is 96 years old. She is a psychologist, a therapist who I met early on in my career when I was with a company who had the great foresight to have a coach on standby for us to talk to. And that was 20 years ago. And I still know her and I still talk to her. And to know that this work can go on for the rest of my life is what she models to me. So, and she always reminds me to just stay curious. So that's a person who was very near and dear to me.
I love that. And the other side of this question is, who are you helping to grow?
Gosh, I think
Me.
okay, Richard Garrett. No.
And plenty of others.
Well, I would say that another way that I got into this work is that I have always been the natural, go-to coach, right? I had in my recent job, there was a, sales force of 70 plus reps, and many of them would call me on a regular basis and say, hey, just between you and me, I need a little pep talk. I need this, and so I can't really speak for people, but I have many testimonials and great things people have written me that have, definitely I borrow their belief all the time. But I would say I'm just innately kind of that person that, because I'm fascinated. I want to know everything about people. I want us to be the very best we can be. And so I've always been that kind of confident and champion and cheerleader.
I love it. I think you need to get a trademark on Holly Holton Pep Talk.com.
I will pep talk anyone. They want to call me. Let's do it. Let's talk about it.
I love it. Schedule it. Yeah. We could schedule pep talks. I think there's a service in there for you.
I'm already doing it. So
you're already doing it.
Exactly. Just get my number. I'll help you. Yeah. And I have to do it to myself, Richard. I mean, all of this that I've talked about is a practice I practice all the time, that okay, I hear you, little voice. I get it. All of that is something that we all have to do. It's just part of the work to keep moving forward.
And to be very clear, I am not teasing that you have helped me grow through this. I have experienced more than one Holly Holton pep talk and on call. So thank you.
And I'm so glad you brought up toxic positivity too, because I am not about that at all. I mean, it is tough out there. And we are living in a world of like complete chaos. If you even look around, it's nuts. So we need the very best of us. And it's not, from a standpoint of not being realistic of what's happening.
Okay, Holly, I've got another last question here for you, please. Tell me, we're here in the bounty of the Northwest, but tell me what's one of your favorite places in nature.
I love the Southern Oregon coast so much. We go there every summer.
The estuary, where do you like to go?
So, like what town? We go to a place between almost on the California border. Like
Okay.
there's redwoods almost on the beach. But something about the ocean and the Oregon coast in general is just so beautiful to watch the waves go in and out and feel that we are like part of that rhythm of life and that there's something so much bigger than us. So I think anytime, anywhere in nature, I love the mountains, I love the woods, all of that. But when we can plug into the fact that we are all connected to something greater is, so calming to me. But I love to be near the ocean.
I can imagine it. I've been there to the Southern Oregon coast, and it's picturesque, to say the least.
It's so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. And just, yeah, to know. And even like, thinking about a garden, like thinking about that, like I'm looking out my window at this huge rhododendron that just has all these little buds on it and they're about to like burst open. And just to know that like, gosh, nature just keeps on going. We all are listening to these crazy voices in our head and nature just keeps on, knows what to do.
That's amazing. I think that's a perfect way to end our episode, too. Just keep going and persevere like a force of nature.
Yeah. And it's not always easy, but you have more power than you think you do.
Holly, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation and all the other ones that we've had in the past. I talked about those patent pending Holly Holton pep talks, but you've helped me today in this conversation talk about self-resilience and positivity, but not overly toxic positivity, but borrowing the good energy from those that believe in us most when we need it the most. I think that that's very current for many of us out here.
You can
So
borrow
thanks
my
again.
belief anytime.
And I will.
Great.
So thanks again for joining me. Any other parting thoughts?
Just thank you so much for having a big talk with me. I love talking about all of this and yeah, just thanks so much. It was wonderful.
We'll do it again, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
And everyone, remember that big changes start small. And I think that we hear another example in this episode today with Holly. And we'll see you again on next episode. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.